Thomas Symonds, you never stop criticising the government for their failures. What objection could you possibly have to an effort to make the removal of foreign national offenders quicker and more effective?
Well, clearly, people who've no right to be in this country shouldn't be here. But what we've seen from the Home Office is utter incompetence on this. And let me just take an example as well. We talk about the asylum system. The government keeps saying the asylum system is broken. They've been in power for 11 years and they broke it. If you look at 2014, 87% of asylum claims were being dealt with within 6 months. That figure had fallen to 20% by 2019. And what did the government do? They got rid of performance targets. And what we don't want to see is the government deflecting blame for their own failure, when it is their incompetence, their management and mismanagement of the Home Office that's been the problem.
So Labour's solution to people coming ashore on the beaches of Kent is that there should be performance targets for civil servants?
There should be performance targets in the asylum system, but in terms of the issue of boat crossings...
They're going to wave that at the boats as they're coming ashore?
No, hang on. In terms of the English Channel, in my view, the government needs to look at a number of measures. Firstly, the long-promised agreement with France, that needs to be effective and it needs to be fully published, made available to us all. That's first, and that's a priority for the government. Secondly, the government needs to revisit its decision to abolish the Department for International Development, the very department that existed to prevent people being driven from their homes in the first place, the very department that was trying to deal with the issues that come from war, poverty and persecution. Thirdly, the government needs to look at the issue of safe routes. For example, they closed down the DUB scheme. The DUB scheme, which everyone in Parliament expected to take in 3,000 unaccompanied child refugees, was closed down prematurely after 300. That's the kind of approach the government needs to be taking, because none of us want to see people making these dangerous crossings across the Channel.
OK, let's deal with a real-world situation. I asked the Home Secretary about the two men in Glasgow, and she's pretty clear. She's pretty hard line on this. They're going to go. What would Labour do?
Well, look, as a general principle, people who shouldn't be in this country, people who shouldn't be here, absolutely, yes, they have to be removed. With this particular situation in Glasgow, I don't know, in terms of the particular circumstances of it, I'm not sure the due process has been observed. The Home Office doesn't have a great track record on that, I'm afraid. I think something like 55% of asylum claims succeed on appeal. So I think there has to be that guarantee on due process. And second, the whole method of immigration enforcement by the use of dawn raids is something the government has to seriously reconsider, because that particular method of enforcement isn't something clearly that is building the confidence right across the community that we need to see. With
respect, Mr. Thomas Symonds, what you're telling me is why the government isn't doing its job. What I'd like to know is, what would you do if it is demonstrated that these gentlemen should be removed because they have overstayed? Would you, as she has promised to do, be sending the immigration enforcement people back in?
If it is shown that due process has been fully followed and people aren't entitled to stay, whether it's the two men in Glasgow or indeed anywhere else, then yes, of course, they should be removed. But the point I'm making, Trevor, around enforcement is that the particular method of enforcement that's being used here, which is this sort of dawn raid system that's being used, is not a method of enforcement that is gaining any kind of confidence from the community. There are better ways of doing things, but people who are not entitled to be here, yes, they should be removed. OK, big story today, the BBC. What do you think that the BBC, the national broadcaster, has to do to restore the public's trust, and in particular, the public who fund it? Well, fundamentally, the BBC now needs to show that what happened with the Martin Bashir interview couldn't happen again. That obtaining of an interview by deception, and we've seen the impact that's had on the royal family. You've heard Princes William and Harry talk very movingly about the impact that that has had. And then very understandably now that's raised very wide questions about ethics and about how that can be prevented from happening again. I think there's a specific question too as to how the BBC came to once again employ Mr Bashir in 2016 and how that happened. But look, the BBC makes some great programmes. The BBC still has a great reputation around the world, but it now has to rebuild trust and prove to people that what happened then couldn't happen again now.
Do you think, making Strictly and Attenborough documentaries makes up for lying to Princess Diana? Do you think that the BBC has run out of road and that now it can't continue marking its own homework, which is really the question today?
Well, look, certainly making great programmes certainly doesn't make up in any sense for what's happened here. What's happened here certainly has to be dealt with. Now, there has been a change in governance structure since back then. In those days, of course, you had the Board of Governors who, were regarded as, of course, too close to the management at the time. And there is this different structure that exists now.
Okay.
There is, of course, but what we need to see from the BBC now is quite openly to tell us what it is in the structure that now exists that's different that would stop that from happening and what they're going to do now to rebuild that trust.
Thank you very much, Dick Thomas Symonds from Cardiff.